Hello and welcome to another episode of the Classical Republican. Today we're talking about Noah Webster quotes. Classical Republican Noah Webster quotes. Now this is one of my companion videos with the other Noah Webster videos, and we're just going to be going through some quotes from his writings. The first one is, two regulations are essential to the continuance of Republican governments. One, such as distribution of lands and such principles of descent and alienation as shall give every citizen a power of acquiring what his industry merits. Two, such a system of education as gives every citizen an opportunity of acquiring knowledge and fitting himself for places of trust. Okay, so let's talk about these. So he's got these two principles that he says are necessary for classical or Republican government. And the first one is about a distribution of lands. He's talking about lands. But he's also talking, so the means of production is what he's talking about. So if we have a means of making a living, everybody needs to have that. Then he also says such principles of descent and alienation. And he's talking about inheritance rights, inheritance laws. So if people shouldn't be able, you shouldn't be able to have a certain family holding on to the means of production, and holding on to it generation after generation. That's what he's talking about. So he would be in favor of having like an inheritance tax, of course, something where you are, as long as you're taxing them on the means of production. So if they have like a residence that they live in, if you have a personal items like maybe like a personal stamp collection, or I have a coin collection, that type of thing. If you have personal items, that type of thing, those won't be taxed. But if you have shares in a company, if you own a factory, if you are inheriting lots of farmland, something that's more than what you're going to farm yourself, he's saying that should be taxed. And then the second one is is education. And so you have to have an education that's going to give you knowledge. And the way he describes it here is really interesting. Fitting himself for places of trust. Okay, so I think that's where you can be involved in government, where you can be involved in, sitting on boards and commissions, where you will be trusted, or you sit as a trustee to make decisions for others. Or for like a corporation, or for a charter or something like that. A chartered corporation. Okay, here's another quote. Judges and all executive officers should be made as much as possible independent of the will of the people at large. They should be chosen by the representatives of the people and answerable to them only. Okay, so he doesn't believe in direct election of judges. And throughout the United States of America, we have some places where judges are appointed, and other places where they are elected. He also says that people cannot bind their representatives. So when it comes to the distinction between representatives being a delegate, or where they have to directly represent the will of their constituency, as opposed to a trustee, someone who is, their judgment is trusted, and so they are sent off to go and represent the people using their best judgment. They don't have to care too much about public opinion. I think that was a bigger thing, especially after the French Revolution, having these delegates who have to vote the way their people want them to. I think today it's more seen as a little bit of both, being a trustee and a delegate. He also didn't like paper money. He says, quote, "Extensive credit in a popular government is always pernicious and may be fatal. When the people are deeply or generally involved, they have power and strong temptations to introduce the abolition of debts, an agrarian law, or that modern refinement on the Roman plan, which is a substitute for both, a paper currency issued on depreciating principles. In short, the whole art of governing consists in binding each individual by his particular interest to promote the interest of the community," end quote. So that's pretty interesting. I think that stands on its own. He didn't like paper money. He didn't seem to like the agrarian law, which I think he means redistribution of wealth. Although he does believe in some redistributions of wealth, such as inheritance taxes. Quote, "Laws to prevent credit should be beneficial to poor people." Okay, so I think that would, today he would say those quick loans would not be, they should be outlawed. He goes on to say, "Acquiring property too fast or too slow is not good. Paper money and credit give the appearance of wealth, but they're not." And this quote here, "But how shall this union of interests be perpetuated? The answer is easy. Bar all perpetuities of estates, preventing exclusive rights, preserve all preferment dependent on the choice of the people. Suffer no power to exist independent of the people or their representatives." And he also says, "Barrier to tyranny is a legislature elected by yeomanry," which means like farmers, independent farmers, people who are farming their own land, and they're not absentee farmers, but they're not tenant farmers. But let's go back in that quote. He says, "Bar all perpetuities of estates." So again, if you have a very large estate, he doesn't want you to inherit that. And we're talking about estates like large amounts of land, large shares of stock. So it's not like if you have a big house that needs to be split up. No. Okay. And so, yeah, a lot of inheritance, if it's beyond somebody's, or the children's, the inheritors, the heirs, ability to manage it themselves, then it should be taxed heavily. Yeah, and so this barrier to tyranny is the legislature elected by yeomanry. I think that speaks a little bit to checks and balances and to the mixed regime, and to a middle class. So those are all the things that are very classically Republican. Until next time, long live the Republic.